If you want to teach people, they have to trust you. And the only way they're going to trust you is if you reveal who you are. That means your vulnerabilities. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be genuine.
Hey everybody, it's
Hi,
Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. I'm here with Frank Dorritie. Frank, how are you?
I am very well, Tim. Good to see you.
So great to see you again. Thank you for being here to share some of your time and your expertise with us. Everybody, we're going to be talking about 3 things I wish I'd known when I started teaching. And Frank, I know that like it's hard to narrow this down to 3. Everybody's like, oh my goodness, was that hard for you?
No, what? Well, the thing is, I never had a real job. I never felt like I had a real job. So um, it's easy. I can say that I have been an audio producer for 40 years, and before that, started out in drum corps and marching band, and that seemed like a logical progression. And I continued both of those things at the same time, and continue to this day. And also 35 years worth of teaching at a community college, teaching music business and arranging and audio production. And also before that, 7 years teaching in high school. So, like I said, couldn't hold a job, or at least couldn't hold one job, needed 3 or 4.
Well, of course, everybody knows who you are, Frank. You're legendary in the world of drum corps and instructing and everything. So I'm so excited that we are getting to talk about this. So, all right, great background. Of course, everybody knows the great work you've done. Um, where would you start? What was the first thing that you would want to tell someone that you wish you had known?
Well, I think the first thing I wish I had known was how hip the students really are. Let me give you a little anecdote about that. Uh, my teaching preparation was not the same as most of the people that you're going to interview. My degree is in political science. My path was supposed to be law school, and the Army interrupted that. And after that, I decided, you know what? I really am a musician, so let's just go for that. Life is too short. Okay, but I began to look for a teaching job in order to support music. Now, the issue was, though, that my degree was not in education. It was not even in music. It's still not in music. So but I had been teaching from the time I was 17. Little parade, drum and bugle corps, and some marching band and that sort of thing. So I had teaching experience, but it wasn't the same as taking classes in pedagogy and things of that nature. So most of my experience and most of the things I learned in on-the-job training. So it wasn't as if I had somebody, I can say, I wish they had told me this, I wish they had told me this, but what did I wish I knew? Well, there's a book called Teaching as a Subversive Activity. It's a classic. I saw it in a bookstore one time, and I said, "Well, I'm going to be a teacher. I think I better read something about teaching." And the reason I got a job, by the way, was because these little inner city parochial schools really needed teachers, and they were paying next to nothing. And so the people that really knew how to do it wouldn't take those jobs. But I was eager. Anyway, I picked up this book. Unbeknownst to me, these are not the things that they wouldn't tell you. Nobody's going to tell you these things. Subversive, how subversive this was. But quick anecdote in how I learned to understand how hip the students really are. In the book, there is an interview or a reference to an interview with Ernest Hemingway, wherein an interviewer asks him, "What is the one thing you need to know to be a great writer?" Now, substitute teacher for writer here, okay? Well, what is the best thing, or what is the one thing you need to know, if you could boil it down to one thing? And he said, in order to be a great writer, you must have a foolproof crap detector. And I thought to myself, that's pretty good. File that away. My first day on the job, it's a little school in Jersey City, inner city school. And I got the job because 3 people before me had sort of burned out in one semester. And that was because these were seniors that they were trying to teach, and they were tough city kids. Well, I grew up in New York City, and I thought I could handle tough city kids, and I didn't think I was going to have a problem with any of this. So I walk into the room, and I'm writing my name on the board, and behind me, I hear some mumbling and chuckling and things like that. So I, fresh out of the Army, by the way, P.S., I turn around and say, look, I don't know what you people are used to, but in my class, nobody talks. And I turn around, now that all eyeballs open and everybody sits up straight, and I think, okay, got that. I turn around to write on the board again. I step right into the waste paper basket. And it gets stuck on my foot, and it's like a comedy routine. Okay, I have my back to the class, my foot's in the waste paper basket, and I realize I'm toast. I'm done. And at that moment, there was nothing else to do. I turned around, I looked at everybody, and they don't know whether they should laugh or not. And I just said, well, I guess that tough guy act's not going to work with you guys, huh? And the place just erupted in laughter with me leading the laughter. I get the thing off my foot. I never had one stick of a problem after that relating to those kids. Why? Because they understood that I was a genuine person. I was going to be genuine with them. And their crap detector did not have to kick in with me, because we all have had that, right? This person is giving me a line, No. From that point out, so it validated what I had read. So the one thing I realized about teaching, and it was, again, it's on the job. It's not, nobody told me this. Is something I wish I had known going in the first place, not have to have an embarrassing situation like that. But it was that if you want to teach people, they have to trust you. And the only way they're going to trust you is if you reveal who you are. That means your vulnerabilities. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be genuine. Because then they will believe you. And you can cop to not being perfect, because guess what? You won't even have to do that. Their little detector is going to detect when you're not perfect anyway. So I think that's the most valuable lesson for me, was to discover that one about the detector, and understand that everybody has one of those, and that it's going to kick in, and especially students have those. So that's number one. Be genuine.
I think that's really profound, Frank. I love that you started with that, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we can always tell when we interact with anyone if they're just giving us a line or if they're really being real. Students, especially these days, can really tell that. The thing I love also, Frank, is the last couple of years, people keep talking about this. Like, there's a switch. Like, I've been doing these interviews for what, 12 years now or whatever, something like that. And this is a difference. Now people, literally the last couple of years, a lot of instructors keep talking about, I'm going to be authentic in front of the students. I'm going to be my real self. When I do that, it gives them permission to be their real self. So it's amazing to me that you figured this out so quickly, because I think a lot of people worry about what happens if I really show everything I don't know.
Right. And it's a little bit scary, but it's also, we know that there's a big turnover in the teaching profession, and particularly in music education. And what happens at some point to the people who leave is they say, you know what, this is not the right place for me. So you better find out if it's the right place right away. And one of the best ways to find out is to just be who you are and see how it goes, as opposed to trying to be the drill sergeant or the whatever. Now, I'm not saying not to have standards. That's another thing. You must have that.
Of course.
But no matter how good your content is, your delivery is more important, because people, as I say, they have to trust you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think back to when I started teaching, I was very worried about my students finding out how much I didn't know.
Oh, sure.
And I wish that it took me a while to figure out that they didn't care. They just wanted me to be me and do my best. But the thing that saved me, Frank, I think is what you're talking about, is that I really was being myself and I was giving them everything I had to give, and they knew it. And so that was all they needed, you know. And I wish I had just been able to relax earlier in my career and know, like, you know what, it's okay if they realize I don't know very much about this thing over here. I can ask somebody. I can find out.
Amen. That's right. And it's particularly, it's more so now, I think, especially in terms of almost any subject, because now we have that little pocket terrorist, you know, called a cell phone, right? In our this guy, and oh yeah, here you go. I'm a Luddite. Okay, I'll cop to it. There's all right. Here's my phone. But someone can check you in a minute. And in fact, before you ever walked in front of that rehearsal or into that classroom, they already know who you are, or at least they know what your reputation is on social media.
Right.
So now you really are exposed beforehand. So that's just another level, which I didn't have to deal with until I got to recently into the college, and people started telling me in class, "Oh yeah, I saw you. You know, you played in that individual contest at DCA a couple of years ago." You know, and I realized, oops, wow, you know, good thing
Yeah.
good thing I wasn't terrible, you know. I wasn't.
No,
you know?
No, I mean, that's very interesting. The world is really different than it used to be. By the way, you have nothing to be ashamed of with your flip phone. I love it. You're actually kind of hip. I think those are coming back. You're extra
yeah, everything that was old is hip again.
It always circles. But what's interesting is I also think social media has that weird thing where a lot of times people are showing you what they want you to see and who they want you to think they are. But right. I still think even with that sort of template, I think that people know. They can still tell. They still know if that's who you really are. I think we can all read between those lines.
Yeah, and that's something that was not at the front of my mind when I started teaching. Like I was not thinking about, well, are they going to know? No, what was in the front of my mind was, how do I take control of this situation? You know, I'm the adult in the room. I have to, you know, so that was, I think that was the most, you used the word profound. It certainly was the most profound thing, you know, for me. So that's number one.
I think it's huge. And I love that your answer to figuring out how to control your students was to really be yourself. That to me is a really empowering thing. Okay, so what's number two?
Okay, so number two, this is going to the other side of the brain now, okay? This has to do with kind of the logistics of how one can be successful, I think, particularly as a band director, or a guard, you know, instructor, or something like that. And that is, you teach the students, but you recruit the parents.
Wow.
Because without the support of the parents, well, any band director will tell you these days that nobody's rolling in money, and they're the ones who are going to help you fundraise. But that's just the surface level of it. You know, you have a big concert coming up. You don't want that young person to come to you and say, look, this is our weekend to go to Disneyland. And
right.
You know, my dad says we have to go to Disneyland. So if you have parents who understand what the commitment actually is, and that they are in effect turning over their student to you at certain times and places, and the importance of that. The real important. I'll give you another sort of anecdote about this. It goes way back to when I was about 18 years old. I was marching in a drum corps in New York called the Long Island Sunrisers, and they were pretty good at the time. And we were hired to do a in between games exhibition at a New York Mets doubleheader. But before I could go to the game that day, my father said, or the day before, my father said, look, you have to mow the lawn. So I said, okay. So I go out to mow the lawn. I start up the lawnmower, and they had repaired the blade and not put it on properly. And the blade came off and hit me in the foot. So I end up in the hospital. And the night before, we're supposed to do this kind of thing. And I get released, but I've got a cast, you know, and all of that. And my father says, well, you can't go to that. You're not going to go to this shows this weekend. After all, it's just an exhibition. It's not a contest anyway. I said, no, you don't understand. I have to go. I have to go. I play solos. I'm like, I have to go. They depend on me. He said, look, you can't go. I said, look, Dad, I won't march. Okay, I'll stand in the front. I was in what we call the pit today. I'll stand in the front. I'll play my stuff from up there. He says, well, I'm not happy about this, but okay. So of course I go, and of course I march, and of course the thing is televised, and he sees it. Now, any normal parent would have grounded me for the rest of my life and said, you can no longer be in that drum corps. But you know what he said to me when I got home? He said, that must be really important to you, because I'll bet that hurt like hell.
What a smart man.
And years later, I realized that's the kind of parent I want for my band kids. Who understands things at a whole other level. Not that he would put this kid in danger, but that he understands how important it is to that young person to play that performance. And I don't care if it's the state championship, whatever, or it's a delicatessen opening. That's a performance, and that's how we roll. So that's number two, was understand that you're teaching the student, but you're recruiting the parent. And the
you know what
parent
that makes me think? No, I love it. What a great story, Frank. What it makes me think of is something very along the same lines that I learned somewhere along the line, and that was that you have to talk and teach the parents. That's what you're really talking about, because we spend so much time standing in front of our students and telling them that's the philosophy of our program. This is what's important to us, blah blah. But a lot of times people forget to do that with the parents. The parents have to understand all of that too, to the point you just made. This is what's important to us, so that when the parents are singing a contest, they know to clap for every band. They understand about the way that you're teaching your students to think about competition and performance. Your parents, your band parents, your student, whoever your parents are, your students, they need to learn those things too. And it's hard to think about taking the time for that. But to your point, that's how you're going to get them to understand exactly what you're doing.
And you have to decide, how you're going to carry that off. First thing is to be as welcoming as possible to families of your students, to the extent of actually doing performances for them, to have a family night or something like that, or a family day. It's not like you can call up and say, all right, all parents show up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm going to tell you about this. That's not going to work. But
right.
if you can do something for them, have a special performance. Or anytime you do have a performance and parents are in the audience, you make sure that you say something about those people and about how important they are, and about how you could not have what you just witnessed without them. I mean, that's something I'm not sure that see, I didn't go to those pedagogical classes, so I don't know if anybody says this in music prep college.
But these are the kind of things that nobody ever does tell you. For example, another idea, Frank. My friend Greg Basham was a wonderful band director. Now he's a school administrator, because that's how they all end up in charge.
Sure.
But he used to talk about how at the end of practices, he would go out, instead of going to sit in his office, he would go out and be amongst the parents picking up the kids. Hello, Mrs. Smith, how are you? And have time talking to them. And all of us think, oh man, that's exactly. Something but that's how he got to know them and win them over, by going and being his authentic self and getting to know them all and using those times. Mm-hmm. Brilliant idea.
Yeah. Well, however it works for you, and again, teaching is a function of your personality. So if your personality is such that you can actually do that, right. that you're a meet and greet kind of person,
right?
Then you go out and you talk to her and you say, hey, Mrs. So and so, you know, whatever, and just at whatever level, and just be a human being, and just be, because yeah, band is important, and all of the things we do, all that stuff's important. We tend to puff ourselves up a little bit about it too, about how important it is, and we're teaching all these wonderful life lessons, and we're the most important thing going. On the other hand, we might be the most important class, because there are going to be students who the only reason they come to school is to be in the band.
Absolutely.
They could care less about trigonometry or whatever else is going on, and they may not even have good grades. Although most music students do, oddly enough, and I suppose we could talk about that for a long time too. But that might be the only motivation. It's the same with the sport. I know that it might be the only motivation for that person. So
people need to remember why kids do what they do and what's important to them,
right.
and how important those things are. Yeah.
Right. And you as an instructor or a director or whatever, you need to assure those parents that you understand how important this is to their particular child.
Yeah, and make sure the parent knows. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, these are great. All right, I can't wait to see what the third one is.
Oh, well, okay. It's funny, when you mentioned this to me, I thought, how do I get to 3? And I'm sure everybody says that, right? They all say, how do I get to 3? There's so many, and there are things I don't know now that I'm going to wish I knew, a year from now, that somebody would have told me. But so to come up with a third one, and these are in no particular order, actually, is this what you can relate to as an adjudicator. As an adjudicator, we balance the what and the how. Right? We're trying to determine, what are they doing, and how well are they doing it. But as an educator, I have to say, I really believe that the how is more important than the what. And the reason why I say that is that you're not trying to impart factual information or even technique to your students. I don't think that's the priority. Yes, you are doing that, but I don't think that's the most important thing. The most important thing is you are teaching them how to learn. And that will encompass everything beyond music and the rest of their lives. You are teaching them techniques for how to assimilate this information, not the information itself. Here's an analogy. We say, if I say the word music to you, 90% of the people see a piece of paper with dots and dashes and lines, and that's not music. That is not the music. That's a roadmap. And yet it's the content we use, right? That's a roadmap to the music. What's the music? The music is what just happened in the air. Da-da, da-da, da-dee, da-da. That was music, okay? So now it's gone. It's ephemeral. It's not really that you can't hold it in your hand. So this is, how do I relate to something that's not physically corporeal, physically real? How do I learn how to impart the lessons that are in that? The how is important. How to learn, and not only how to learn from you, because you're such a wonderful teacher and you are so open and genuine and all of that, but how are you going to learn from people that are not like that, or how are you going to learn from in other situations? So I really think from the point of view of being an educator, your real job is to teach your students how to learn. I would have people come to me at the college level. Sometimes now it was a community college, so generally speaking, I'm talking about freshmen and sophomores in a 4-year college. So their parents are still pretty much involved in this, and I would occasionally have parents call me and say, what's the most important thing, for my son or my daughter? She wants to be a recording engineer. What classes should she take? I said, well, obviously the recording engineering classes, but she's going to take classes in reading and literature. Well, why? Well, because you're going to have to read a manual that was translated from Japanese into German and then into English. And you're going to have to understand nuance. And you're going to have to understand vocabulary. You need vocabulary more than anything else. And you also are going to need to be able to communicate verbally with people. So if you're going to be a recording engineer, you need to know how to talk to the musician. You need to know how to if you're going to be a producer. See, that was my role. I was a producer, so I had to learn how to say certain things. For example, we do a take and it's not very good, and you can say, "Gee, that was not very good, guys. We better do that again." Or you can say, "In the history of music, uh, probably not the best moment, so let's do it again." Or, okay, or you know what? What do you guys think? And just the tone of your voice will impart, yeah, maybe we could do that. Maybe we should do that again. But how do you relate to people? How do you take the information from them? How do you parse it? How do you learning how to learn? So it's not other people will say, well, I don't know what I should study in college. I think I should study. Let me take the cliche. I think I should study business administration because I want to get a job. And I would always say to my students, well, don't worry about getting a job. And they'd say, what do you mean? Well, why? Well, we're all going to have jobs. Why? Because we have to. We're all going to have jobs. So don't worry. So, and you're going to change your mind 3 or 4 times. So better you should, take classes that you want to take and you're interested in taking, as opposed to ones that you think you should take for some, now there are exceptions to this. You want to be a doctor, you better take, that sort of thing. But nevertheless, in reality, what you have to learn is how to learn. Me, I was going to go to law school. I took pre-law. I had all this stuff, and I ended up being a musician. But I learned how to learn. I learned how to read, and I learned how to listen. And it's not the subject matter itself. It's not the what. The what is not that important. Use the what to learn the how. Use the what to learn how to learn, because then you can learn anything. And if you might start out as a classical, trombonist, but want to play the bluegrass banjo, and you won't be starting from square one because you've learned how to learn. So I think that's kind of it's one that has to be finessed a little bit, but that's one of the things that I wish I had known originally. It wasn't delivering the content that was important. It was delivering the knowledge of how to deal with the content. And there are lots of ways to do that.
Yeah, these are such smart analogies, Frank. Like, I'm so enjoying this conversation because, like, to your point, when we think of the job of a recording engineer, we think of they have to know how to move all those buttons and dials and run the equipment and everything. But you're right, that's not really what they're doing. They have to figure out how to get that recording they want.
Well, let me just interrupt you there because I had a thought, and it again, it's an anecdote, okay? But and again, it goes back to my childhood. Television was black and white when I was a kid. When I was a little kid, when we first got one, and it was a big deal when we got one. And then one of the things it would do was that it would interfere. There would be interference or something, and it would roll. The picture would roll. And my father called the repairman one day. And my dad, you have to understand about my dad, he was a bartender in Times Square in New York City. So before we had psychiatrists and psychologists and people like that, counselors, we had bartenders and hairdressers,
Oh, they're still doing that work, Frank.
But anyway, so the repairman comes over to fix our TV, which was doing this roll thing, and the guy comes in, he turns the cabinet around, he takes out a screwdriver, he looks at it, he goes, boom. Turns it around, everything's fine. It took him, I would say, probably, 2 minutes. And this was in the 1950s. And so my father says, wow, you fixed that. That was pretty good. He said, well, my pragmatist father, he says, well, look, that was pretty good. He said, what do I owe you? And the guy says, well, you owe me $10. My father says, $10? $10? All you did was turn a screw in the back, $10? He said, I think you should give me an itemized bill. So the guy says, okay, fine. $1 for turning the screw and $9 for knowing which screw to turn and how much. And there's your recording console analogy right there.
Right.
Okay. Sure, you need to know how to drive the car. You need to know how to drive the Mercedes, but you also need to know what road to go down and what the speed limit is. Okay, and what the road conditions are, and so you can make the right choices. That's what I mean about learning how to learn.
It's great.
You
The
know,
other thing around this that I'm thinking of is that one of the things I found a lot of instructors don't do well is hand the learning over to the students. And sometimes we'll go to a clinic and we see the staff is doing all the work. Whereas when you know that when you see a really fantastic group performing, those students have taken control of their own learning and their own work and
right.
their own show. And that's what's so thrilling about it. But so many instructors that I have worked with over the years don't understand that idea of teaching them to learn and take control of their
Precisely.
own performance.
Precisely. You have to teach them how to own it.
Yes.
Okay, and so that they can
Or be willing to let go of it.
and even to the point of just even with, so maybe you don't know how to teach them how to own it, but you can certainly say, you know what, you need to own this. You need to own this. This is your show. I'm not the helicopter instructor that's going to be out there going, oh, move 3 steps to the left. No. You got to own that you need to split the distance between you and the person on either side of you. You're responsible, and you're right to turn it over to them and realize and let them understand that they have a right to it and that they ultimately are going to own it.
I mean, it's their show. They're the ones that are going to go out there and march around and perform it.
Yeah, we'll stand on the side and take all the credit, but but they're, but they are going to own it, and the result, the outcome, whatever it may be, is in their hands, not ours.
But once you get that built into the culture, then that works. But that's not always baked into the culture of the group that they have to take control. And hey, it's really my responsibility if I learn this music and this set.
Let's take it a step further. When you have a couple of students who really get to that point where they do understand these things and they do know how to own it, and now do you turn some of the instruction over to them? There was a man, this name might be familiar to you because I know when you marched in drum corps, he was still active. His name was Dr. Bernard Baggs.
Oh gosh, legendary.
Baggs, okay? And Dr. Baggs
legendary.
was, without going into his full resume, at the time of this little story, he was the fine arts director or the performing arts director at the Bergenfield High School District in New Jersey. And I was teaching the cadets, then known as the Garfield cadets. And I had a conundrum, which I won't even go into. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And I didn't know what to do about this certain thing. And I went to see him and I said, Dr. Baggs, what do you think I should do? And he said, well, I have 2 things to tell you. He said, first of all, as far as that question is concerned, he said, what does Frank Dorritie think he should do? He put it right back on me. Boom. Like, okay, all right. And I said, okay. Well, I said, but I'm starting to teach now. I'm going into school systems and all of that. He said, well, I have a word of advice for you as a teacher. I said, what's that? He said, be on the lookout for Mozart. I said, what? He said, be on the lookout for Mozart and know what to do with Mozart if he shows up. You know what? One of those kids sitting in front of you at that band rehearsal in that French horn section is Mozart. One of these, or a Mozart, substitute.
Yeah.
There's a Mozart of Bergenfield sitting in front of you, and you need to recognize that and not hide that person, but encourage that person and allow that person to bloom. Now that's I snuck that in. That's another one of those things I wish I had known right away. But since we got on that subject of turning the thing over to the student, turning over the responsibility to the student, you have to recognize when it's time to do that. I mean, that's a little Mozart sitting there, and maybe, hey, why don't you write the chorale? Or why don't you write the warm-up flag work?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You've seen other people do this. Why don't you? That is how. Again, I go back to my learning of how to teach came from instances like that, where my mentors, my instructors in drum corps, did that for me.
Yeah.
So no, you write this, and of course, you watch them and you guide them and you fix the issues if they come up. But that is one of the best ways, and that will perpetuate this activity, this beautiful, wonderful, pageantry music activity that we're involved in. It will perpetuate it if we can bring those next people up and stop thinking about, okay, we're in charge, and we're
Right.
the deal, and we're the only ones that know. We have the knowledge, and we're in the big tower, and we have all this knowledge. That's nonsense. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll go away. It will be a plaque on a wall somewhere. Whatever your great marching band was, someday it'll just be a little or a photo on the wall in the band room. Oh yeah, we used to be good back in the day, and then why aren't you good anymore? Well, you know what? We did not do that. We didn't nurture the next generation.
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding a little crazy or whatever, I'm not saying I was a Mozart, but I can tell you that my band director did that for me. Like you're saying your instructors did for you. Like he recognized something that I was excited about or a skill I had and nurtured that. And he was very important to me. He was sort of the first person to do that in my life in such a big way.
Got it. Ditto. Okay. Did it right back at you for that. And it was the combination of your excitement for it and your ability, and it wasn't even ability, it was ambition and drive. Okay, because you know what, I know what a good player you are. I know that. I saw that. I been there, got the T-shirt, the whole thing. But but how you got that way. There's a lot of people that are just as talented as you. And talented as me or more talented than us that end up not achieving at those levels because nobody blended those two things for them. Nobody said, right, okay, you're excited about this, all right? And here's how you do that. And now what? And it fed your. I will take desire as even in a competitive situation. I will take desire over ability any day.
Yeah. Any day. Oh, of course.
Okay. Because the prima donnas, you can have all the prima donnas in the world. If they're not working for you, if they're all about themselves, forget it. But I'll take, blue collar, working class, kids that can't spell, but I'll take those people any day as long as they have the ambition, the motivation. And I think that's what you had. You had the ambition to take what was in front of you and run with it. Now, some people are going to call this obsession, and you know what? I don't care. I don't care.
It didn't hurt me.
No, I don't care if it's obsession. How do you get good? You get obsessed with something. If you're laid back and casual about everything in your life, well, all right, you're okay. You're probably going to be okay. You're not going to have any real problems, but you're not going to have any real success either.
Yeah. That's amazing. If anybody that's listening to this conversation, I did a podcast conversation with my band director, Mr. David Coles, where I was able to say thank you to him, and that's out there on the Marching Around Table podcast. That meant a lot to me. And Frank, I want to share this with you. I love telling the story. I still remember the day I was standing in the band room at my high school. I think it was probably a junior in high school, and he put the Prokofiev Romeo and Juliet ballet on the stereo, and I heard it.
Wow, yeah.
And I literally credit that as a life-changing moment. I was never the same. And I always appreciated that. Like, that's the kind of thing he gave me, this idea of those sounds are possible. I had never heard that before.
Exactly, right. And it's funny you mentioned that piece because I know you're a horn player, and the first thing you did when you got home that night was try to play some of those violin intervals. And it was like, what? That's impossible. How could anybody?
Right. And then the next thing I did was run out to a record store at the time, everybody, and buy that full ballet and listen to it endlessly. I'm telling you, it was just, I'll never be able to thank him enough for that. And of course, a million other things that he opened me up to, other music and other. But anyway, I love telling that story because that was literally a life-changing moment for me.
Oh, sure. And you know what? I think all of us who remained in music education have moments, or at least one moment like that.
Sure.
And it's always a human moment. It's not an accident. It's like somebody showed you. They said, "Hey, come here. Hey, kid, come here. Look at this."
Right. Love it.
Anyway, there we are. There's my three things.
Frank, I thought this was going to be a good conversation, but this was just an absolute joy. I loved everything about this exchange and hearing your anecdotes and sharing this great advice. This was such a fun conversation. I wish we could talk for another hour, but we'll stop for today.
Someday we will.
We will do this again for sure. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much. Anything you want to say in wrapping up to everybody?
Well, just that, again, reiterate, just be who you are. And you will find out if if you should be a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You'll find out in a hurry.
You sure will. Frank, I loved it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. See you, Tim.
Marching Arts Education is the home of the Marching Roundtable podcast. We give you access to the top marching arts professionals through live webinars, podcasts, videos, interviews, and online coursework. With over 1,000 podcasts and hundreds of webinars and videos, there are hours of great professional development for you and your staff. Sign up for a membership to Marching Arts Education to get complete access to all webinars, videos, and podcasts, plus discounts on coursework. Many directors are using professional development funds through their school or boosters to make these resources available to their staff. Imagine what you could do with so many great new ideas from the top professionals in our activity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter to find out about the latest podcasts, webinars, and new content. Find all of this and sign up at marchingartseducation.com.